A very warm welcome to all our NRI customers to our exclusive monthly webinar series, Life Beyond Borders. Today, we will be covering the topic on exploring emerging opportunities in exports in India and delve into how exports and global trade are shaping India's economic future. We will try and gain valuable insights into export strategies, market diversification, and the role of government support in driving growth. One of the key factors driving the economic growth of any country is its exports. India witnessed 600 times growth in total exports since independence. India exported a mere $1.27 billion worth goods and services in 1950 to 51. Growth remained almost stagnant in the next few decades as well, owing to strict policy regimes. Over the years, India opened its economy to the world, especially after implementation of liberalization, privatization, and globalization, the LPG policies of the center that we call. India continues to be the fastest growing economy in the world despite supply chain constraints, rising inflationary pressures, and a sluggish global growth. A significant contributor to this in India's export store performance, which is going strong despite strong headwinds. To dive into the details of how Indian exports are sailing on the wave of growth, I am delighted to welcome our esteemed speakers today, Rajat Handa and Amit Kumar Das. Rajat is Head Group Distribution and Central Initiatives at HSBC Asset Management India. He has been with HSBC Group for 24 years, having worked across the bank and asset management company in various domestic and international locations. In his current role, he leads the group distribution channel management, heads the portfolio management business, and spearheads the learning and development vertical for HSBC mutual funds. Amit Kumar Das comes with an experience of more than 20 years in investment advisory and handling ultra HNI and HNI customer portfolio across two banks. He has been with HSBC for 12 years now and currently handles investment advisory and strategy for our India business. He has seen economic and market cycles and has an in depth understanding of portfolio creation, navigating, and adapting to changing and emerging trends to maximize portfolio ROIs. Welcome, Rajat and Amit. We look forward for an exciting session. Over to you, Rajat, to take us through what is there for us.
Thank you, Deepa. And I'm joined by my good friend and colleague Amit Das. So, Amit, welcome to this session as well. It's
Thank you,
always a
Rajat.
pleasure to address our clients, whether it's India, whether it's across the world. And Deepa, I think that this journey, which I started with you sometime last year, has transcended across investment, philosophy, and many other behavioral science related subjects, which I think our investors really enjoyed. Today you've touched upon a very, very interesting and I would say a very critical driver of India's future potential. So, first of all, many congratulations for organizing this. Uh, to our investors who logged in from across the world, we are logging in from Mumbai and it's evening right now. But beyond, as they say, beyond the dusk lies the dawn. And we are talking about a brilliant dawning opportunity for India. Before I begin on the matter of exports, and Deepa, thanks for unraveling the suspense. I thought I will build up a suspense and talk about exports, but I think you started with a brilliant summary of exports and an introduction of how exports are going to, propel this economy to the next level. But let me give a perspective to our investors on what all has been happening and what all has been doing well for India. So I think it's not fair to say that this is the only pillar on which India stands. I'm talking about trade and exports. There are many, many things which have been helping India, the economy, the employment generation, the deficits in India, which have now become extremely good, which we call the macro factors, and also more importantly and more pertinent to this audience, the returns and the wealth creation, which all of you are investors across the world who are investing through wealth and personal banking in India from HSBC, the kind of returns you would have experienced and enjoyed over the last 5 to 10 years. So I think this is all because of multiple things which have been doing very well. I can name a few of them. So, manufacturing is becoming a big booster for the economy. Consumption, of course, we know that consumption is as old as India and independent India, and 60% of the GDP comes in from consumption. So these are two extremely critical and magical drivers for the growth in India. The demographic dividend, of course, is driving and helping both of them. It's an enabler. India is a country which enjoys a very, very young and prosperous and aspiring population. I mean, we have the maximum number of people who are less than the age of 30 in India. And these are the people who consume, who get employed, who have aspirations. And of course, you cannot even for a minute forget the fact that India is the second largest producer of human capital, of intellectual capital. You know, after China, we come in number two at STEM, which is your technicians, your engineers, and various other qualified people. So artificial intelligence and the field of innovation has also been doing very well for India. That is where a lot of technology is getting produced, and people are looking at India, just like India had become the technology hub for the world. If I go back 2 or 3 decades back, now it is being looked at as the AI hub for the world. And maybe those days and those years are not far away. So I will not take the credit and give it completely to exports, because all these things have done very well. But Deepa, as they say, is it an idea whose time has just come? Maybe that's the way, and that's a better way of talking about the export theme. Exports has been there, as you rightly said, for many, many years. Exports have been shining in India. You talked about a very interesting number. You said $1.2 billion, right? When we gained independence. I can go back to 20 years and say that we were $62 billion. That was our export book in India. Today, we are almost inching towards the $800 billion number. That's the kind of phenomenal growth which India has seen. Now, why has this happened? Why do we feel that, as I mentioned, I am reiterating that this is an idea whose time has just come and just arrived? And is this a potential for wealth creation for all our investors who logged into this call and all the others who will see these videos later on? And Deepa is always kind enough to post this on social. So let's delve a little bit into that. I will also, request Amit to share his views on the economy and related subjects as we go ahead in this. But my request to all our investors who logged in would be, please keep your questions coming in. Deepa has access to the Q&A and the chat option, so she can see your questions. Anything which you feel is relevant to this session, anything which you feel is relevant to your wealth creation journey, Amit and I are very, very eager and looking forward to answering those queries of yours during this session. All right. So let me start. It's Friday evening in Bombay. Amit knows this. Deepa, you also know this. I don't believe in death by PowerPoint, but unfortunately, I'll have to share some graphs, some pictures, some data. Let me do that. I'll keep it to the minimum, whatever is required, and maybe skip some of them so that I don't want this to be a jaded session. Let me start by some of the interesting things which we talk about, right? So I will just start sharing my screen. Deepa, can you see the screen? I'm just doing a full screen now.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll do a full screen now. I think you can see the full screen. Yeah. Okay. So, okay, the ship is cruising and all this optics are looking very nice. But if I can just tell you that exports is one of those very rare and very few force multipliers in India. This is one action which has a multiple reaction effect. Okay, and all of them we have tried to summarize on this slide. So you can see that exports helps us to create employment opportunities. Exports also helps us to increase the forex reserves in India, right? The forex reserves in India are actually a health checkup. It's like the ECG of a country. The kind of forex reserves you have gives a lot of confidence to foreign investors to invest in India. It also tells you that India is self-reliant. Even if exports stop happening, dollars stop coming in, with the kind of forex reserves which we have today, we can survive for almost a year without any single dollar coming in. That's your import capabilities, thanks to the exports that we have, the forex reserves that we have. Another interesting point which I figured out is that it is also a proxy to innovation. I mean, think about a company which has been only manufacturing domestically. It has access to domestic markets, and now it is getting access to the Western world, to Hong Kong, to Singapore, to China, to Europe, US. It will have to upgrade its technology, it will have to upgrade its standards so that the final product or service is of international standards and acceptance. So it may not be wrong by saying that export is also a proxy to innovation. Let's talk about building the reputation, right? And we know that there are so many large services and goods exporters in India which are now world renowned. In fact, a lot of Indian economy is represented by these global giants thanks to the kind of presence that they have across 100, 200 companies. Last but not the least, and I will talk about this in the next few slides, there is, ladies and gentlemen, a direct correlation and connection between the economic health of the country and exports, right? So let's talk a little bit about that connection. What I'm trying to show you here on these slides is some of the key countries which have shown that there is a direct relationship between the growth in exports which have happened and the GDP growth that they have experienced. Let's not talk about all of them. I'll probably take one or two cases. Let's look at China. Now, the black bars that you see here are the export growth rate that these countries have experienced across various time periods. So you can see we are comparing here the 1994-2014 era. This is the 20-year golden era of Japan, of China. And then we are talking about the last 9 years or 10 years, which have not been such a glorious time frame for a country like China. Well, I don't need to tell you, I think a picture speaks more than 1,000 words. You can see that the exports were rocking, and so was the GDP growth rate. Look at what happened to exports now, Deepa. I mean, in China, exports are growing at a meager 4% rate, and the GDP is a reflection of that. Let's look at Japan. Japan had its glorious days between 1985 to 1995. Japan was, the Casios, the Sonys. I mean, I'm just taking you back to those days when Japan was a dominant player in exports and the GDP. Now, if you see, the Japanese rate of growth in exports has come down to a very, very low number. And look at the economy. If I'm not wrong, it's in negative territory now. So there is actually a degrowth which is happening in the Japanese economy. So I think there are many, many indicators which tell us that across the world, if the country is rocking and doing well in exports, the exports are getting boosted, the GDP will also look very good. This, Deepa, is not the promo of the next Soccer World Cup. In case people feel that I'm promoting the next Soccer World Cup, it's a graphic which tells you what are the export books of various countries. Okay, on the left hand side. So you can see the big one. Of course, we all know China, the factory of the world, still has that reputation. $3.5 trillion. That's the kind of export book which China has. Amit would agree that this $3.5 trillion is very, very close to the entire economic size of India GDP. So China is exporting what India is GDP looks like today. That's the kind of power which exports have. Let's look at the next one. Let's look at United States of America. Very close to $3 trillion. That's the kind of exports that they do. India is here, somewhere probably number 16, number 17 at 783 billion. Now, why I'm tom-tomming about this, I think you will be able to appreciate, our investors will be able to appreciate when they see the right-hand side. This is the ranking of various countries in the GDP table. Now, maybe 20 years back, India was at number 12. India has made leaps and bounds. You're all proud of the fact that India from number 12 became number 10. And as we stand today, India is the fifth largest economy in terms of GDP ranking. Yeah, we are close to $3.9 trillion today. Very, very happy situation, but we are not done yet. The dream is, the ambition is that we should cross and bypass Japan and Germany to become the third largest economy in the world, just behind China. For that to happen, you need to be somewhere here. Because all these countries which have blossoming and booming export books are the ones which are the leaders in the GDP rank table. So I think I've waxed eloquent enough on the fact that your GDP is directly correlated to your export book and export growth and export enablers in the country, and which is where India is now looking at. I always try to make the situation and these sessions a little colloquial and relatable, Deepa, and my efforts continue in this session as well. I know we can't talk to our investors right now. It's a webinar, but if I can just ask our investors that there are certain sectors which are doing as well as the GDP. There are certain sectors which are growing lesser than the GDP growth rate of the country. But if I tell you that we have identified a few sectors which are growing at a much faster pace than the GDP, where would you want to focus your energies, your monies, and your investments? I think the answer would be coming in from common sense, that you would want to pick the fast horse. You want to pick a sector which would definitely want to grow or would likely be growing faster than the GDP of the country. This slide demonstrates that. This slide tells you that the GDP of India is expected to double in the next 7 years. Yes, we are looking at $7 trillion. I think 5 trillion was something which the Prime Minister was talking about 5, 6 years back. People had question marks. That's going to be reality probably in the next 1 or 2 years. But the GDP should double by 2030. Look at what exports is going to do. As per the estimates of the RBI, as per the estimates of Ministry of Commerce, the Prime Minister has gone all across the media and said this: exports are supposed to almost triple in the next 6 to 7 years. We are looking at a $2 trillion export book, half of which should come from goods and half of which should come from services. So that's the no-brainer here. Exports are expected to grow at a much faster and healthier rate than the Indian GDP. Deepa, a question to you: where would you want to put your money, right? So I think this is a clear visibility for the next 7 years, and that's why we are very, very kicked and very convinced about the growing export opportunity of the country. I also have this habit of playing devil's advocate. I know some questions will come on this, but this just now struck me. All this is futuristic. All this looks very promising in the future. Are there sufficient trends and data to prove that India has actually grown in the past? I think you spoke about it, Deepa. This is a graph which shows that across time periods, irrespective of global boom sessions or global doom or recessionary phases, India's export book has always grown and grown and grown and grown. From $62 billion, that was the petty export book that we had in 2000, 2001. And a market share of global exports would be probably less than even 0.5%. I'm just taking a wild guess here. Today, we are close to $783 billion, 13x growth in about 22, 23 years. I think it can only get better from here because this is phenomenal growth. And we are very, very hopeful that this will be even better in the next 6 to 7 years. Okay. Our investors would probably, I'm assuming that, everybody is comfortable with exports and commerce and the field of economics. Assumptions can destroy you. So I beg your pardon. Let me dive a little bit into the world of exports. Yeah, this beautiful theory about exports. So for those who do not follow or do not like commerce, typically exports are segregated into two parts. You have merchandise exports and you have services exports, right? And both are equally important. There is data in one of these slides which shows that almost 45% of our exports are coming in from services, and about 50 to 55% of our exports are coming in from merchandise. So both are equally important. Now, what are the interesting themes or trends that we are finding in both segments of India's exports? I think this is a wonderfully interesting and very intriguing topic, and I'll spend a couple of minutes here. So if you look at services, we'll talk about services first. In the field of services, this is a graph which shows that India is the third fastest growing services exports nation in the world. This is a wonderful statement to say and experience. I will just take a pause for effect here. If you have a look at all the countries given here, Singapore and Ireland are the only two countries which are growing at a faster CAGR in their services exports. They are growing at close to about 11.5, 11.7%. India is growing at about 11.5%. All the other countries are growing their services export book much, much lesser than India. Now, this is a big testament and a big demonstration of the fact that we are a dominant player in services exports in the world. And I'll take our investors through a brief story. And this is a lovely story. Amit and I have discussed this many times. We started our careers during that time. Amit, you would agree. This is the late 90s, early 2000s, when India was known as the call center hub of the world. Yeah, the best and the easiest thing to get into was for boys and girls who were graduating was a call center. Probably that also inspired one of the big authors to write a book on that, fiction. And that's when the world thought that Indians are good at adapting to many Western accents, and they are good communicators. They are smooth talkers. So let's divert our global calls to them. This happened for about 5-7 years. You had centers popping up in Gurgaon, in Delhi, in Pune, Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, all over. A lot of these call centers mushroom. But then the evolution happened, like it happens in all the industries. The evolution happened, And maybe in late 2000, the world realized that Indians are also good at filling up documents, at opening bank accounts, sitting in India, at doing a lot of data spreadsheet and Excel sheet work, data entry. So then from a call center tag, India became the BPO center of the world. Yeah, you remember that word, business process outsourcing? It's a wonderful story. Okay. So that's a little bit higher in the value chain. You're doing much more than just attending calls. And the level of revenue also with these BPOs were earning became much more than the call centers. Okay. Third stage of this evolution in the services export sector came in when the world realized that there is a lot of intellectual capital also with the Indians. Okay. And of course, it was always there, but they realized it a little too late. And then they started sending a lot of knowledge oriented, data analytical, financial analysis work to Indians. And this is when BPO transformed into or evolved into or graduated into KPOs, knowledge process outsourcing. That was the third stage of the Indian evolution story. Deepa, if you think I'm over, I'm not done yet. The last 5 to 7 years have seen a very, very interesting, a very riveting story about India grow. Now, the world looks at India from these following lens. The world wants Indians to make the management strategies, the business strategies for international multinational companies. The world is looking at India for medical research and development. The world is looking at India for doing international audits, for doing for giving tax services, for giving tax advisory services, looking at international taxation, GAR, and all the other things that we keep hearing. And most importantly, and this is the brightest spot in India, a lot of engineering research and development by these large automotive research companies and manufacturers, global giants, is now getting housed and centered in India. What a lovely, unbelievable journey of evolution we have seen in the last 25 years. This latest, this latest evolution stage, we moved from call centers to KPOs to BPOs, is what we call the GCC, Global Capability Centers. Very happy to share with all our investors who've joined across the world that India is now housing almost 45 to 50% of these consulting, research, and development units in the world. The latest number which I read was that I think we had some 1,600 GCCs in India. And the brighter part about this is that this number is going to cross 2,600 in the next 7 years. So there you go. This is probably the pinnacle of IT services evolution which this country has seen. And this actually tells you, this graph tells you how the various GCCs have started contributing to Forex revenue of India. So last year, $26 billion of revenue from export services revenue was contributed by just one segment. And that segment is engineering, research, and development. One of the strongest fortes for Indian engineers and companies who are looking at outsourcing research to India. So this is an example of services exports. Moving on to the next side of the coin, the other side of the coin, we are talking about the manufacturing exports. This story is also equally exciting. As I was talking about the evolution in services, Amit and Deepa, we have also seen a big evolution and a very dynamic shift happening in goods exports as well. And we usually do this when we are talking to our investors in person. We ask them, what do you think India is known for when they export? So someone will talk about petroleum products, somebody will talk about textiles, somebody will say gems and jewelry, handicrafts, jute, leather garments, all that stuff. That is the old India. That is the traditional India. This very interesting data segment talks about the changing trends in goods exports in India. I'll give a few pointers here, not all of them. But if you see, this is our share of total exports product wise in the year 2014. And this light pink bar is our current share in our exports of the same product. So petroleum products, it's more or less the same. We have not neither grown nor fallen severely. Agricultural products, we used to, out of every $100, $12 used to be agricultural exports 10 years back. Today, this number has fallen to about 11%. So we have degrown. We have probably defocused as compared to other sectors. Textiles, big one. It's a big one, right? So out of every $100 that India was exporting 10 years back, $12 was textile. Now it is only about $8. Yeah. So we've been hearing about India losing out share in textile exports. No wonder the data corroborates that. We've also lost share in gems and jewelry. And Deepa, I'm sure you would relate to that. Now you will find a lot of Indian gems and jewelry sets and all those ornaments at a much cheaper cost because we export much less of that as compared to what we used to 10 years back. Now, this is a way of looking at probably the declining exports. What I also want to focus here are the exports which have catapulted, which have galloped tremendously in the last 10 years. Let's look at the other side. Chemicals, from 5% 10 years back, now we are almost 7.5% of our total exports in chemicals. Which is the other one? Machinery. Oh, this is a revelation. India was one of the biggest importers of capital goods, machineries, if you go back to 10, 15, 20 years. From 5% share of machinery exports, today we have doubled our overall basket of share of products to 10% in machinery. And I would say the biggest revelation, and this is what the Prime Minister was also talking about a couple of weeks or a month back, is the field of electronics. From a net importer of electronic items, if you recall, Amit and Deepa, everything we used to either, a gizmo or a gadget or, a handheld video game, everything used to be made in Taiwan, made in Japan, made in Hong Kong, made in US. From 2.4% of our share in Indian exports, electronics has gone up 3 times in 10 years. Just imagine the kind of change and the kind of impetus which the government and the industry is showing on this sector. So this is a slide which tells you that exports, like anything else, is changing. Tectonic shifts are happening between different segments and different sectors in exports. According to us, and this is purely an HSBC house view, and this is also supported by many other research houses and reports. For example, from Bain, we have got this analysis that the next 5 years belong to these 6 sectors. Probably these 6 sectors would experience the biggest jump in Indian exports. What are these? For the benefit of everyone, we have chemicals, we have pharma, industrial machinery, electrical and electronics. I just talked about automotive parts, and of course, something which we were losing share. And hopefully now with problems in our neighbors who were leaders in textile exports, we should benefit textile and apparel, right? So these are the super 6 sectors where we feel that exports would probably gallop. And the expectations are that between a 13-15% to a 22-23% should be the compounded annualized growth in these export sectors over the next 4 to 5 years. So this is one of the most amazing unfolding stories in India today. Yeah. We are coming to the end of this monologue. And then, of course, I will encourage Amit and our investors to give in their views and ask questions. Exports was there, is there, and will continue to be there. Why are we, and why is Deepa put a call around exports today? Why exports now? Yeah. So I'm not trivializing the issue, but I'm saying that is there a big requirement of focusing on exports now? Is something happening today in India which was not there probably, or which was missing in the last few years? Maybe yes. And there are some of these things which we've kind of summarized and highlighted here. I think one of the biggest reasons why we should look and focus, and we are looking and focusing on exports as a sector, as a way of creating wealth for the next 6 to 7 years, is the very important part of evolution. I just told you about the evolution, that why India used to be known as a call center hub of the world, because we used to get people at a very low cost. Yeah, very low cost. So India ranks at probably one of the bottom most when it comes to the average wage, and one of the high skills. So it's a combination of wage and skill is probably the most attractive in India, used to be. Now it has changed. Now, as I said, from call center to GCC, now India is being looked at from a value-added solutions. We have a lot of, we have a chief economist who's also been talking about this for the last 3 years in our the HSBC group in India, and saying that India is now adding more and more high value and high cost exports to its basket. So this is a change which has started happening over the last recent 3-4 years. The other thing which is happening is that we are also getting a lot of support from the government. I don't want to tom too much about it. There are many things that the government is doing. Just to talk about a few of them, handful of them, which strike all of us. I think now PLI, the term PLI is one of the most Googled and one of the most popular 3-letter acronyms in India. Yeah. And I'm very happy to say that this was launched when the first COVID case hit India, which was March 2020. The government said, let's focus on reviving the industry, let's give them support and incentives. Today, this is one of the most popular and the most successful policies that the government has been able to execute when it comes to commerce and industry. The production linked incentive scheme has enabled 14 sectors, companies who are covered under 14 sectors, to have support. And it has garnered additional revenues to the tune of almost 3 to 4 lakh crores. That is the recent estimate which we have. And it's also generated a lot of exports, has generated a lot of employment. And, it is just the beginning. It's just 3, 4 years that this policy has taken effect. So it's kind of a booster for companies to come to India, to set up their export hubs and achieve their export targets. The government gives them an incentive. The second policy, and a very interesting one, it's not a policy, but I believe it's something that the government is doing to help exporters and export businesses in India, are the number of free trade agreements which the government has been signing with medium-sized, large, and small nations. So these FTAs ensure that there are dedicated corridors. There are most favored nation status which are given between two countries, India being one of them, and you are compliant. You are on the right side of the WTO. At the same time, there is a very amicable relationship between the importers and exporters of both the countries. So you are very generous when it comes to trade barriers, tariff barriers, custom duties, and all those entry barriers which do not facilitate trade between two countries. So this has happened. I think there are 13 to 14 FTAs which have already been signed in the last few years. And a big one, which we are all reading about it in the papers, Amit, that's the EU FTA. It is being negotiated. There's a lot of thing about climate compliance and all that. So once those issues are ironed out, that probably will be one of the biggest FTAs and one of the most successful FTAs which you would have seen in the recent past. So these are some of the policies which the government is helping exporters with, and I think this is also boosting exports in the country. So this is a little bit about the enablers of exports. Our outlook, and this now we are coming to the final few slides of this presentation. The outlook on the economy, the global economy, is a very reasonable and a fair one. Okay. Again, talking from a devil's advocate's perspective, I know there'll be questions on this, that is the world going to go into a recession? What if US, China, UAE, Singapore, Hong Kong stop buying from India? What is going to happen to exports? I think most of those fears are unfounded. Most of those fears are, maybe for the want of a better word, let me use this statement, are over exaggerated and overstated. As a house view, we don't feel that the larger economies like the US and all are going to go into a recession, right? There may be some fluctuations in their growth rates, but the demand for goods, which usually come in from India and other countries, should remain strong and even strengthen. That's our view at a fundamental level. This slide actually tells you about the fact that most of these countries where India is a major trading partner actually have gone through the worst during COVID. And now we are expecting a recovery in demand over the next 3, 4, 5 years. So it's actually a contrarian view to a lot of populists who feel that, the world or doomsday scenarios which people are painting. In fact, on a lighter note, the lady the lady economist whose views were and opinions were touted a few weeks ago, Claudia Saham, and that's what led to a lot of discomfort amongst investors, has herself clarified and said, I don't think you have read my statement or my rule the right way. The base case scenario for US is probably a soft landing. It's not a recession. That's what she has, I think, put into social media just yesterday. So we feel that the world will continue to grow. US, in fact, is supposed to grow at 2.8, 2.9%. The unemployment, the jobless claims have started fallen. So who's talking about a recession here? We are not talking about a recession. And that, I think, should give a clear visibility for Indian exports. So I think I've spoken enough. Lots of data which I have shared with our investors. Deepa, we need to give it to them. And of course, Amit, who's a very learned and very enthusiastic student of economics, to share his views as well.
Thank you, Rajat. I think summarized quite brilliantly the entire emerging landscape. Like you, I also believe what is seen is to be believed and not always go by theory. Export has been in India from a long time now. Most of us believe that like European goods are of greatest quality. Like somebody's buying a watch, somebody's buying a mobile phone and everything. But not many people know that from 1995, most of the European watch companies The precision dials and everything is supplied from an Indian company, not known. We know the one subsidiary of that particular company that got listed recently called Ethos Watches, but the parent company called KDDL Limited. No, not discussing stocks. Just clarifying that like these businesses have always thrived in traditional India, but they have been exporting. We all know Maruti Suzuki, quite an Indian company. Very very proud of that brand. The model called Fronx, I think launched last year, sometime in 2023. That is getting exported to Japan. And Japan as a made in Japan is a brand, right? Made in Japan is the economy, the country has become a brand in itself because of the consciousness of quality, about longevity, about what you bring in. So Japan basically bringing Indian cars and Indian company exporting there tells you a lot about the quality that you have brought in the last few decades. Honda is another company. Elevate is getting exported to Nepal and South Africa at this point of time. So lots happening there. Let's talk about iPhones. I think Deepa uses iPhone, I have seen. And many a times in 2020 till 2022, you end up buying an iPhone either in India or US or Dubai, everywhere. It will be made in Taiwan, made in USA, everything. Now, as on 2023, 1 out of 7 iPhones worldwide is made in India. That's the Apple website telling me, not theory. And this number has doubled in last 1 year, by the way. And Apple basically wants 25% of the entire production to be made in India in 2030. So in the 6 years time, your 25%, that means 1 out of 4 Apple phone would be made in India. And you know the size of Apple, they make 200 million phones a year. They sell 200 million phones a year. So likely to be almost around anything between 30 to 50 million phones will be made in India. That itself is a $1 trillion candidate. That's a JP Morgan report. This is the scale we're talking about, and there are ways to sort of take part into that, benefit from that. See, economic theories will remain economic theories if we do not apply in practice. These are macro theme, but there are ways to benefit from them. Align our portfolios accordingly so that like we benefit, we take part, and sort of adjust our portfolios accordingly so that like we all get benefited. Deepa, what do you, if you have any questions or if you have seen anything which is somebody is asking?
No, absolutely, Rajat and Amit, and you guys have just convinced us while we are all bullish on India exports, but how does it contribute to the Indian economic growth and the future aspirations all of us have is fantastic. I still, have some questions, from our customers who are sharing. While export is a great story, everything is great, but there are also certain challenges that export companies may be facing, like there are certain countries who become quite protectionist about their own in their own domestic manufacturers, and there are trade barriers or tariffs, etc., which get increased for importing goods in countries. So how does Indian exporter face these challenges, and is it true that there is real challenge, or we can overcome them?
Sure, sure. No, that's a fair question, and Amit can add to this. My view is that the protectionism has existed since the time two countries started bartering, right? So I'm taking you back to prehistory. So there was barter, and then it became foreign trade. Okay, so I have silver, you have gold, and let's trade. Deep. I'm talking about those days. So I think protectionism has been as old as the world started understanding the importance of trade. It has at times, because of various phases, because of various leadership changes, regime changes in the Western world and the developing world, it has sometimes come into prominence. At times it has gone into hibernation, but it has always existed. So let's understand that this has been a constant in the exporting community's life. You will never come across any exporter who will say that I have never bothered about a high tariff suddenly propping up, or custom duty on something going up. So that's always been the case. Now, how do you counter that? How do you ensure that there is ease of business and your revenues kind of remain insulated or are less affected by these protectionist measures? I think FTAs are one way of looking at it. So these 13, 14 FTAs which have happened and many more which will happen will ensure that the level of protectionism, at least from an India perspective, is lesser. The second example which I can give is that people always talk about the Donald Trump era. Right now, no, I'm not calling the election here, so please don't misread me. I'm nobody to call that. But what if he comes back again? And we all know that there were trade wars which started getting played between US and China when Trump first came in, which was around 2015-16. Now, that symbolizes the rise of protectionism, that symbolizes trade wars, that symbolizes less democracy and less openness and fairness between trade. That's one of the questions which come up. And, we have seen that. Let me tell you that, and maybe Amit, you would agree, or I don't know your view, but what we have seen is that India has always indirectly benefited whenever the giants have locked their heads. Okay. So a lot of trade has started coming to India. Remember the China plus one theory, which we keep talking about? Yeah. So if China is exporting less and less to US, if China is exporting less and less to a polarized world where the US government and Europe, and of course we feel that there is polarization, then a lot of opportunities start coming into India. In fact, we've done a data survey on that, and we realized that India actually increased its global share of trade during the Trump era as compared to the Obama and before that, and whoever was there before the Bush era. So at times optics kind of mislead you. Optics do not give you the entire picture, but data is always the final and the eternal truth. So we go by data. So we feel that the environment will continue to be conducive. Amit, anything you want to add to this?
No, I absolutely agree. And see, Deepak, I do agree. Those deglobalization theories or protectionist theories do exist, becoming a reality as there have been civil disturbances in many of those part of the world. But those are tactical in play. They cannot be a sort of uniform theme for a rest of the part of the history. So it cannot go on for 10 or 15 years, because if you need today services, IT services, you cannot suddenly create another giant like Infosys or TCS. You can't. Many things have become sort of necessary for those economies to survive. That is one. You can apply reservations for some time, but later on you need to understand that for your own economy to survive, you need somebody else's help. You cannot sort of remain aloof. You cannot remain in a corner and still the growth will continue, because growth is a necessity for any sovereign democracy to survive. That's the oxygen of the growth is the oxygen. Nothing else matters in the long run. For growth to become a permanent sort of texture in any history or any civilization, you have to work in tandem with other countries, because then only economies can survive. Because somebody has scale, somebody has capacity is built up. You want to build factories there, okay, fine. Then your economy will also go back by another 5 or 7 years time. Are you willing to pay that price? The answer will everyone will agree to is a big no. So for 6 months, 3 months, nationalist sentiments and everything might prevail, derail the growth by some extent, but ultimately it's the multilateralism, or suppose this monopolies will be broken, and people have to take help from each other, and that's how export
Correct.
as a theme will always prevail. And somebody can give you quality export, that economy and market and country will always do well.
Absolutely. I completely agree with both of you all. My next question is to Amit. While we have seen in the slides which Rajat presented the historical growth of exports in India, where do you see Indian exports going in the next maybe 5 years, 10 years? And which sectors specifically you think are we going to focus on as an economy?
Absolutely. Like I think what the government data tells us that like it's going to be $2 trillion, Rajat, if I'm not wrong,
That's correct.
in the next 5 to 6 years. But again, these are conservative estimates. Please do understand, this is if things move at this particular speed, then this is what we are going to end up with. But I am also quite optimistic about global growth. Global growth is coming out of woods. So if the global growth picks up, then I think we'll end up, the global demands will increase. If the global demand increase, our supplies increase, and we end up at a much higher number. I just give an iPhone example. Apple itself is saying we are going to bring 25% of the iPhone from India. If the number is anywhere around 50 million iPhones, the number in itself is around $1 trillion. One company, they're doing that much. So that is one part. So I think the opportunities out here is in multiples. It is not it's not basically addition happening here. It's multiplication happening here. So the opportunities that huge. Now where that's a bigger. See, traditionally Rajat has already told you that like services always remained our strength. And from my college days, university days, I think I have seen a lot of people joining BPOs, KPOs, everything. So that has remained the same. We have sort of gained prominence there, expertise there. So that to replace India as a services hub, it will take decades for people. Something has horribly, miraculously pop up in some other country, because you cannot produce a low skilled, high skilled, low cost English speaking basically population of this magnitude in anywhere in the demographic dividend. That's why it's so powerful in India, because majority of the people are below 30s, and to the average population to get to the age of 40 will another 20 26 years are still there. So we have near sort of quasi monopoly there services. Manufacturing is a big thing in India, and we have seen how it has played out, how now all those phones, all those ACs that you used to import from outside is getting manufactured in India. And because you are also manufacturing, you are also not only meeting the domestic demand, you are also meeting global demand. So I think that is why this export as a theme we are so positive about, optimistic about, because it ticks you a lot of baskets. People are gung ho about manufacturing. We are also equally positive, but export is a bigger, because it's not only domestic demand we are talking about a rising global demand. So I think services, manufacturing, these are the prime industrial, these are the prime themes. Indian defense companies are also now exporting. This is one of the examples. You can have a look. You just browse the newspaper, you will get to see how many BrahMos we are selling to other countries and everything. So both the one the where we already have a strength that will grow, one where we are gaining strength that is going to grow at a slightly faster pace. So that is what we believe what India will be in the next 5 to 7 years space. Rather, anything from your point, if you want to add?
Yes, yes, and rightly put, very well validated and supported by examples also, Amit. I think the headline number is 2 trillion. The headline number which people should look at is a 15% kind of a CAGR in the export sector. And Amit rightly said it's a conservative estimate. In fact, some of the good companies should grow at maybe double that number. And finally, the fact is that if you look at 2 trillion, that is the objective of the government. And if we are supposed to reach that whenever in the next 5, 4, 6 years, then you are expecting almost a tripling in your services basket and a 2.2x growth in your goods basket. So I think some very, very solid numbers here to support the growth rate and the future forecast of exports here.
Thanks, Rajat and Amit. The next question is quite interesting. Forex reserves consist majority, is in dollars, right? Whereas still INR is getting depreciated year on year. So why would that be? Because if you're growing in exports, forex reserves should grow. Why is our
Okay.
INR depreciating?
Okay. Amit, the economist, would you like to take that? Or would you want me to
Okay,
share?
so one fundamental, and I'll tell you the positive of depreciating currency here,
Yeah.
and we should not alter that equation again. Okay, look, any country basically who is spending more than it is earning is likely to always will have deficits, and deficit always has a positive element to it, negative element to it too. Positive element when basically we are spending for development and creating assets which will give us revenue on the long run. You understand, right? Making bridges, metro rails, subways, and everything. These are positive capital investments. So we are spending more than we're earning. So that's why our country will always run in a deficit. That's why our INR will depreciate. That's why inflation is high. Inflation is nothing but basically the rate of depreciation of a particular currency. Now let's understand the dollar inflation and the rupee inflation. Now US traditionally have been running inflation of almost around not more than 2.5% year after year for a very long time. Last 4 5 years have been slightly different. So don't in economics basically we always look at 50 60 year data. So that's around 2.5% kind of a depreciation. India has been last 70 60 years depreciation would be what, almost around 7%, 7.5. Right now it is within the range of 4.5. So you see, so US currency is depreciating at a rate of 2.5% on a longer period. Indian currency is depreciating at a rate of 7.5% on a longer period. So there's a difference of 5% between the inflation or the depreciating percentage between INR and USD. So that is why vis-a-vis INR, USD, we are always going to depreciate.
That's right.
That's how things work, number one. Plus, also, we are an importing country. Please, let's be very fair. We are we import energy from all over the world by oil. So that's how our industries run, our cars run, and everything. So because we import more than we export, so we have to pay in dollars, so our currency will depreciate. But do you know it's good for an economy? And let me tell you, if your currency is low, depreciated vis-a-vis the one to where you're exporting to, so your goods should always appear cheap, right? Imagine today, so dollar is INR to USD is almost around 83. Do you know? So that means anybody gives me $1, they get goods worth 83 rupees. If INR suppose by any miracle basically become 50 rupees, so the guy who is spending $1 is getting lesser amount of goods. So you will not like it. So somebody who is buying from you will not like it, because earlier he used to get 83x out of $1. Now he's getting 50x. So he's making a loss, right? So depreciating currency is good for exports. Yes, somewhere down the line, maybe in the next 20, 30 years, we export enough, and
Yes.
touch wood, if happens that, then obviously our currency will also appreciate, our import will go down, maybe then things will become different, then we will see. But right now it is playing in our favor, to our advantage now. Rajat?
Yes, and I perfectly explained, which is why I said Amit, the economist, should answer this. I can just add to this by also saying that there has been a very active and a very thoughtful intervention, timely intervention by the Reserve Bank of India. Whenever, the currency has been volatile, they have always come in to manage the volatility. And if you ask me, Amit spoke about the differential in inflation. You also have to look at the REER, which is a real effective exchange rate. We always make that basic error of comparing, Deepa, the rupee to the dollar. We forget that there are multiple other currencies, a basket of currency, and that is your real effective exchange rate, right? So according to us, if you ask me, and this is a pure, we don't, we are not in the business of predicting currency, so please don't take that as any kind of a guidance here. But this is a house view which we usually discuss and explain. We feel that as per the real effective exchange rate, the rupee is actually slightly overvalued. It should not actually be at 83, 84. Maybe the right price, the intrinsic price vis-a-vis the dollar should be an 88, 89. So here you go. For exporters is good news, because in the next couple of years or quarters or months, there is scope for the rupee to depreciate further. And like Amit explained, it brings in more orders, more business, and more focus on Indian exports.
Thank you both for giving us the economic view as well to the question. The next question is on, from two of our clients who have sent this regarding, the countries which are our neighboring countries, Asian countries, right, who are growing as great as India is. And what are the challenges our Indian exporters will see from countries like Singapore and Vietnam, especially, where we are seeing Vietnam growing really very fast in terms of manufacturing sector. Their cost of labor is also as India. So what do you think about that? The challenges our exporters are facing, and what is your view on Singapore and Vietnam?
Sure, sure. I can give my perspective and then Amit can add. So, valid question. All is not hunky dory. But what I can tell the gentlemen who have asked this question is that if you see it from a relative perspective, things are much, much better as compared to what they were a decade back or 2 decades back. So, India is definitely improving, right? It is coming up the ladder. Maybe those days of being ranked in the number 5 and number 10 countries, like we are moving up very fast in overall GDP, maybe the ranking in exports is also going to increase, and that is what the government and the entire manufacturing and services industries initiative is, which is why we are touting about the $2 trillion number. So one is the rhetorical part that things have changed, and yes, they will continue to improve and continue to change. India's ranking in the ease of doing business has also seen an improvement. We are not there where we should be, but where we were 10 years, 15 years back, I think there's a massive change and a massive improvement. Now, coming to the couple of countries, and you named a few of them. Let me add another one, Japan, right? Let's not forget Japan. So if you're talking about the eastern part, you mentioned Singapore. I can add Taiwan, Vietnam, Japan to it. There is an interesting theory. Amit was talking about some economic theories. There's a very interesting theory called the random wild geese theory, the free geese theory. And it's a very interesting one. Amit, we were discussing about it the other day, where it says that if you want to understand where the exports of your country will go, you need to delve into history and see the patterns which other countries in similar size, similar demographic, similar circumstances have shown. And surprisingly, Deepa, there's a very common, a very regular pattern which is coming across in these countries that you mentioned. So one is on the goods and items that they were producing and now they're exporting, and the other is how their exports have evolved. Okay, and maybe it's a lesson and it's an indicator of things to come for India as well. So all these countries, Japan, Singapore, Taiwan, Vietnam now, and a lot of other countries, Korea, they all started with very, very basic stuff when they started. I'm talking about goods right now. So very basic stuff, consumer oriented goods, which they started, and then they evolved into high end capital goods, electronics, and all. So that is one trend which we saw. If you remember, I just showed you the India chart as well, that we were very good in gems, jewelry, we were very good in handicrafts, and now things are changing. So this is how exports pick up. The other thing which is equally interesting is, the stages of exports. So the first stage of trade for a country is imports. You are completely reliant on imports. Okay. Then comes in a bit of boost to manufacturing, and that is what we call import substitution. Can you start with baby steps as an economy? Can you start manufacturing? Can you start replacing the components that you were importing earlier and start manufacturing them? Take those small steps. This is what has happened in Japan. This is what has happened in China. This is what has happened in all the other countries. And then once you start figuring out and start making those imports less and less relevant, the third and the final jump is exports. Then you become 100% or a 50% or a 70%, and your trade balance shifts more towards exports than imports. And that's when you call yourself an exporting nation. So these are common patterns which we have seen across countries. And looking at this, I think it's very clear. India also started with the imports, like Amit was saying. Amit forgot to mention gold. Amit, gold is another 20-30% of our our importing bucket. 75%, like Amit said, is oil. And now from a 100 to a $150 billion kind of a trade deficit, we've come down to a much more manageable number, which means that our imports have come down and our exports have also started picking up. So this is a trend. To long answer short, the time is not far away when we should be rubbing shoulders with these developed economies when it comes to our trade basket as well, our export basket as well.
Thank you both for your detailed answer on questions, and and India's story still looks strong. Coming to the next question, Rajat, you did cover in your slides on the government policies and reforms that play a great role in growing exports. What do you think the way forward? How do you think government policies will continue supporting? Anything that you think that we should definitely continue or have more from the reform perspective to help our Indian exporters?
Yes. So I intentionally and purposefully did not mention one big initiative which the government is taking, and I thought I'll leave it for the Q&A part. My intuition has again worked out. The question has come now. So I spoke about the PLI, and I think people can relate to PLI. So if you remember, Amit, you would recall the software technology parks of 1990s and 2000, and that was meant for boosting IT. It took almost 10-15 years for that STPI incentive, and now we see the dominant leadership which India has in IT exports, right? So just copy paste that and superimpose that to the PLI. So I may not be completely wrong by saying that what PLI is to manufacturing, STPI was to IT, and it all took 5-10 years for the results to show. Okay, so I think this PLI, this boost to the Make in India, and I think the Prime Minister just announced on 15th of August another slogan which he gave, that design in India and design for the world. So all these initiatives will probably show consistency in the next 5-7 years. We should see similar success that we saw in the 90s and early 2000s when IT became a big one. One big initiative, and this is obviously a gap in India, is the logistics part, which I did not touch upon because I knew a question would come. We know that, let's talk about China. China is the largest exporter in the world. It's a factory of the world and all those things we've been hearing about. It's because of a reason. It's not only about the quantity and the speed of manufacturing that they have. It's also about the way they are able to ship finished goods from the factory to the ports. We've heard about dedicated rail corridors, Amit, where the entire the finished good is exported within a matter of hours to the world. China also, I was reading somewhere, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks approximately for an Apple phone to be made in China. But even today, after all this technological innovation, India still does that in a couple of months. So there is a lot to catch up. And I'm talking about, since you asked me about the challenges and the impediments to exports, how can, and rather, how is the government helping in that? Let's read the fine print of the National Logistics Policy, the NLP. It's a brilliant initiative by the government. This also came up a couple of years back, where they are in a very dedicated, focused manner trying to improve logistics, trying to improve warehousing, trying to create infrastructure. We keep hearing about the Bharat Mala, we keep hearing about the National Corridor, the Golden Quadrilateral, all these dedicated corridors to ship products from factories to the ports will help in two ways. One, you would reduce the time, and obviously the cash to cash cycle in an export book is very, very important for an exporter. The time to manufacture goods and export. And the second part is the cost element. We just heard about the transport minister talking last 2 weeks back, saying that the cost of shipping goods, the cost of moving goods has to come down to 8 or 10 rupees something. That was a unit which he talked about. So that, I think, is going to be a very, very strong enabler for the entire ecosystem to prosper. Of course, the free trade agreements and the PLI will continue to ice the cake, but the cake itself will be based on the infrastructure and the logistical improvements which the government will support us with. And I'm very, very optimistic and positive about the future on that.
Any additional views, Amit? Would you
I'll
want?
just, I think very, very well summarized, but I'll just add the one quotation which Rajat is known for quoting all his brilliant thoughts. But Richard Nixon's legal advisor told, do not basically sort of watch what we do, not what we say. Watch basically what we do, not what we say. So look at the statistics. And statistics, I'm not telling what's going to happen there. What has already happened in 2014. 10 years back, precisely. I'm not going much there. 2014, the road building construction in India was 12.1 kilometer a day. Now it is around 34 kilometer a day. It has become 3 times. Do you know? So this is the intent, and this is what basically stability or policy stability looks like. So this is where the entire you asked, is government doing enough, or is the continuity is seeing? It is only the intent is only increasing. PLI is a fantastic scheme. You are incentivizing people for producing goods. And once you produce, you either have to sell somewhere, and there are enough buyers because our costs are low, our quality is great. So I think continuity is there, Deepa, and the policies are there. Look at the budget expenditure. Look where basically government is spending money and how much money is getting spent. That is also sort of budgeted estimate and real estimate. Those are also shown in the economic surveys and in the budgets. That will give you enough and more example is what is happening on the ground in India right now.
Thank you, gentlemen. With this, we come to an end of today's session. Rajat and Amit, thank you for your time and valuable insights into exports in India. I'm sure that our NRI customers have got some great takeaways from today's session, and I completely believe in India's growth story and how Indian exports have a strong contribution for the same. To our customers who have joined us today, I hope this was useful, and do keep tuned in for our future sessions. If you believe in India export story and want to participate in this growth, do connect with HSBC India. We have exciting opportunity coming your way. In case you want us to take any special topic or share some feedback about today's session, please do feel free to reach out to your Premier Relationship Manager. We'll see you soon again for another interesting session. Have a great day and weekend ahead. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Deepa.
you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Amit. Bye-bye.
Thank you.